So let's begin. So let's see. Do I have? I think I know everybody. Welcome, Damaris. So I won't bother with any introductions or anything like that. But today I wanted to talk about a topic that's been putzing around in my head for a couple weeks now, and I wanted to talk about the ego. And the topic of this talk I named "O House Builder, Thou Art Crazy." And I'll explain where that comes from. Though, for those of you who know the suttas, you know that, and I'll read this here, the words that the Buddha said upon his enlightenment. Through the round of many births I roamed, without reward, without rest, seeking the house builder. Painful as birth again and again. House builder, you are seen. You will not build a house again. All your rafters are broken. The ridgepole is destroyed. Gone is the unformed. The mind has come to the end of craving. That's what the Buddha said upon his enlightenment. So, the house builder, there's debates on what the house builder is, but for me personally, I think the house builder is our ego. It makes perfect sense, right? If you've seen the movie The Little Buddha, actually, when he says that, he's looking at himself. Mara comes in for the final attack in his enlightenment, and there Keanu Reeves is as the Buddha looking at Keanu Reeves, and he says, "O house builder, thou art seen," and then it fades away. So, in the last year or so, I've come to get some insight into what this ego is, and the ego makes me laugh. There's a few things in Dhamma that really make you crack up, and the ego is one of them. And that's why I came up with the term. If you're old like me and you've ever seen or heard of the movie "The Gods Must Be Crazy," that's where it connected with me. So the ego must be crazy. O house builder, thou art crazy. And the reason the ego, this thing, what is the ego? When we think about our thoughts, right? We think, oh, those are our thoughts. That's me. That's mine. Even if they're like weird or crazy or like totally off the wall thoughts, or thoughts that don't seem to fit our perception of what we are. It's like, oh yeah, that's our thoughts. I guess I'm just thinking really weird today or something like that. But when you practice, you come to almost to start to see the ego as this separate being that's not you, but it's in you. And you're like, what the heck is going on? What is this thing? When I talk about my first experience with mindfulness, with the monkey mind stopping, I was doing my walking meditation, and my mind wanted to sing a song, and so I let it sing the song, and then I just noticed for the first time ever that nothing was happening. The monkey mind had become quiet. There was no thoughts of the past or the future. There was no thoughts of anything that's coming out. There was a controlled thought, because I remember thinking to myself, "What? Wow, this is amazing! Like this ended. What happened?" And it was such a crazy experience. Now, it happens and it comes and goes, just like all phenomena. It comes and goes. But the more I practice and the more I analyze what that was, there is this I don't know if I call it from the subconscious or what, but when you have that mindfulness, there's still thought. At least, I'm not into the jhanas or anything like that, so I can't say that I have been to had an experience where there was completely no thought whatsoever. But there's levels of that, and there's this ego that has all of these thoughts. And I think that the best way to come face to face with your ego is to not be able to talk for 7 days. When you go on a retreat, a silent retreat, you are stuck with your ego. You can't talk. So not talking and not socializing and not interacting forces you to be mindful of what comes out of your mind or your subconscious or whatever this consciousness is. For instance, there are when you have this ego, right? So if I was like the last retreat, I was kind of propped up as like, oh, this is a, Jayantha, he's, been to the retreats before, because a lot of people were new. So it was like, my ego was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to show everybody what kind of a good Buddhist I am. It's like the ego. So it'd be like, oh, I remember thoughts of my ego saying like, oh, I can bow good, or I can do this good, or I can do that good. And as I'm doing these things and this stuff is coming in my mind, I'm just laughing. Because it's this ego, this being that we prop up as ours, as us, that is doing these things, and you wonder, why are they doing these things? And it seems to me that there's no rhyme or reason why the ego wants to do these things other than craving. It just wants it, so it says, it's like your control center almost. If you're not thinking about it, the ego wants it, and you're not mindful. It's like, okay, well, I want that, so I'm going to go after it. But when you're mindful, you can see these thoughts occur, and you can choose not to do anything about them. Or you could choose to just analyze them and laugh about it, because you wonder, like, where did this come from? This doesn't seem like me. And so you start to question, what is me? I think this is kind of where, the Buddha is going with this whole concept of anatta, not self. I can't claim to be highly advanced or a knowledge or an understanding of that, but you start to, the more you practice, the more you start to see around the edges, and the more you start to observe and to think and to see, what is this? Another thing, I'll give you another example. I had weight loss surgery a couple years ago, and I went from a very big person to now a very in shape person who is told that they're very good looking, etc., etc. And if you let that go to your ego runs with that, man. Your ego loves it, because your ego is like, like you want to strut your stuff or whatever. Your ego wants you to, like, you see like a pretty girl, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna walk that way instead. Like your ego your ego says all these kind of things and tries to get you to do all these things because of this craving, because the ego wants it. The ego wants the attention. The ego wants the approval of these other beings, right? So yeah, affirmation, that's exactly, I was looking for a word like that. Thank you very much, Maureen. The ego wants it. Yeah, that's that craving, right? So if you're not mindful, the ego just runs rampant. And I think this is where Mara comes in. Mara, some people say he's an actual deva, being that whose job is to, screw with people, kind of like the devil in Judeo-Christian. Some people say he's just the an analogy of the mind. Well, I almost connect this ego with Mara. So it's not, oh, house builder, you are crazy. It's Mara, you are crazy. So it's almost like Mara is this ego telling you to do all these things. And you don't see that unless you're mindful. Which is why the practice is so important. So Mara, turns out, Mara to me is like, they, in the scriptures and stuff, that Mara is this evil thing. Like, to me, Mara is like a comedian. He's like one of the Three Stooges. Because you start to see these things and you just laugh, because you wonder, you know what it is? I guess it's because you start to realize that your whole life you've been controlled by this stooge, and you've been like led around like it's a chain, like you're a fetter, right? And when you start to become mindful of this, you say, no. You break that chain and you say, I'm not going to do that. Or, I don't need to do that. That's not skillful. That's not beneficial. And I think as you do that, you start to break down the concept of me, myself, and I. And this is something, Buddha says that this is a gradual practice. So you don't meditate, and one day all of a sudden, boom, you know that you're not a self. So I could see how this gradual practice occurs. It's like a slowly with a little chip. Like, you ever see archaeologists digging at a site? The reason why they can be at like one 10-foot site for 50 years is because they have the little chip and the little brush, and they're brushing and chipping and getting the rock away from the skeletons and all that kind of stuff. That's like what the practice is. You got the little rock, the little brush, and the little chip, and you're just gradually chipping away. And that's how it seems, at least to me, in my experience, how you start to develop the wisdom, the insight. And you start to see that this ego is definitely not yours. It's not you. It's almost this separate entity. Where does it come from? You try to find it. You try to find the ego. Where is this ego? You can scan your mind and your body and just like, where the heck is this thing? I don't know. It's just somewhere. So, yeah. Well, that's part of the practice of trying to find everything, right? Like the book that we're reading, The Four Foundations of Mindfulness. That's what Bhante Ji says. You also, the book that I'm reading, the Buddha walks into a bar. That's what the Lodro is saying. To observe this, observe that. Where does it exist? Is this part of you? Where is you? So it's interesting in that regards. The other thing about the ego, which cracks me up, is the ego is so in love with itself, and so in love with its own self-importance. And it makes you feel like you have this, like you are this utterly unique being with these utterly unique circumstances. I'll give you, for example, for me, in my person, because I have a little bit of asthma, and because I was in really bad allergies and asthma as a kid, and starting to do meditation, I was having all these issues with the breath. And I thought, oh, well, it must be because of my asthma, it must be because of this, it must be because of that. And I've come to realize through my own experience that that's not true at all. I mean, it might have a little bit of an effect on my practice, but it really has very little to do with it. What I've come to find out is that everybody has problems controlling their breath. The time that you actually can be able to sit there in meditation and not control your breath, you know it. Because the first time that happened to me, it was almost like the same time as when I had the first aspect of mindfulness. I realized, like, with this profound shock, holy crap, I'm not controlling my breath. This autonomic part of your body, and you realize that you don't need to control your breath at all. When you're not thinking, your breath is still going. You're not going to stop and die if you stop thinking about breathing. But this ego, this mind, has this feeling that you have to control it, or else you're going to die, or else you're not going to breathe. So, and especially if you grew up having like strong asthma, you have these fears, because what does happen is these fears develop. So you have these fears of stopping to breathe, and so my ego had all these fears and all these feelings like, oh, nobody else has to deal with this, or very few people have to deal with this. BS. Everybody. There's not one thing in your practice that you or somebody else hasn't had to deal with in the past. Maybe if you believe in former lives, you probably had to deal with every kind of experience throughout the millennia of samsara and the aeons that you've been in former lives. So that feeling of what the ego tricks you into thinking, that can be helpful to some degree, but it also can be very, very harmful. I think when you realize that what you are going through, everybody or many, many people have gone through, it helps you to drop that mental baggage, to drop the ego, and just be there with mindfulness in the present moment, which is what we're trying to do, right? That is our only job, is to be in the present moment as much as we can, observing reality as it truly is. That's our job as meditators. So when we can do that, the more we can do it, the better we come to understand the truth about things. So I think that might be all for my ego. I know I'm not thinking. Normally I can drone on and on and on and on about stuff that I've talked about forever. But like I said, this is my first shot at doing a talk on the ego. So I'm not sure I have much else. So is there any comments or questions or anything like that? The ego believes it should never be denied. Yeah. Why would it? The ego is just trying to be happy, trying to be peaceful, like we all are, right? But the delusion that the ego has is that it will get happy through having these things that it craves. People, places, things, all of these things. But you almost have this insight mind that knows that the ego is crazy. the ego is deluded, is ignorant. The ego thinks that it wants this and that, but the ego don't know nothing. The ego is like he's blind. He's like a blind man trying to lead a blind man. But through wisdom and true insight, that the ego is full of it. Yeah, exactly. It comes from observing. At least that's every insight that I've ever had comes from observing. I haven't tried anything else. May all have deep wisdom and true compassion. I like it. Although my ego likes pretty much anything that Ajahn Chah has ever said. Or maybe my insight, my wise part of me likes everything that Ajahn Chah has ever said, because he's so true. I can't know if he was enlightened or not. And I think, didn't we talk about that? I don't know if we talked about that. Because people always like to have their teacher be enlightened. That's part of the ego too. The ego of Buddhism, of Dhamma practice. My teacher's enlightened, which means I'm going to get the best teaching, and you guys all suck because your teacher is not enlightened. So, and this story from Ajahn Chah, since you brought up Ajahn Chah, one of my favorite stories is that somebody came up to Ajahn Chah and asked, "Where is Ajahn Chah?" And I guess, and the story goes that Ajahn Chah knew this person to be somebody who is not very attained in meditation and stuff like that. So he points to himself, "This is Ajahn Chah." And then so another person comes and asks, "Where is Ajahn Chah?" And Ajahn Chah, I guess, knew this person to have good potential or a lot of practice. And Ajahn Chah said, "There is no Ajahn Chah." I figured that quote would fit with our talk on the ego, this self that we claim, that we cling to and enjoy, that also brings us much suffering and pain. It's a good question. Do you believe attachment is real? I think, I don't know about delusion. It's hard to know if delusion is real if you're in delusion. But I think that the ego, and I think we can understand about attachment, at least at a base intellectual level. Let me ask my ego real quick. Hey crazy Mara, what do you think? Is attachment real? I don't know. He goes, "Yeah, it's real, and it feels good. So let's go try to get that chick in that hot car." Because I like it. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, my ego is crazy. He's funny. But that's because all of our egos are funny. Well, validation cuts through our doubt, right? The ego is like, "Oh well, I think I'm a cool person, but I don't know, I might not be. Do I have the latest fashions? Do I have this? Do I have that?" And then when everybody's like, "Oh, you're cool, you're hot, you're awesome, everybody wants to be with you," and then the ego's like, "Oh yeah, there's my validation. I'm cool, hot, and awesome. I'm good." And people will do whatever I tell them to and believe whatever I say. Until they stop doing that. Until you're not cool anymore because somebody else is cool. And then what? Dukkha! And your ego gets pissed. "Damn you, Dukkha. I had it good. I was what does Marlon Brando say? I could have been a contender." I had it good and now I don't anymore. And then you get depressed and sulk. That's all greed, hatred, and delusion right there. That's being separated from the beloved, or what is pleasing. That's dukkha. Union with what is displeasing is dukkha. So it's all dukkha if you have greed, hatred, and delusion, and you do perform acts that are from greed, hatred, and delusion. So we still have a half hour. So if you have any questions or you want to discuss anything regarding the ego or anatta, not self, or basically anything, we can discuss and talk. I like having some of the regulars here who like to discuss and make comments, because that makes things more interesting. Because let's face it, I mean, listening to me drone on is okay for a little bit, but but after a while it turns into dukkha. You talk way too much. I think way too much. That's my ego too. Thinking, overthinking everything. But you know what that is, though? That's fear. Because we feel like we have to think so that we know. You know, like a situation comes up, oh, I gotta think about it, I gotta think about it. And the reason why we gotta think about it is because we think that we think about it, we develop a plan to deal with whatever's, what the situation is, so that we're not fearful. Do you know what I heard? Reading in this book, the Buddha goes into a bar. I saw this, he talked about something that really blew my mind in a way. Because what he said is this: hope and fear are really fear. How is hope fear? When you have hope about something, you're hoping that something goes your way in the future, right? And you're hoping about something because you have a fear of what the future holds, or what that future can hold. So you're hoping, which is projecting fear into the future. That is what negativity is. Fear is projecting negativity into the future. Ajahn Brahm says that, and it makes 100% truth, I think. So hope is also suffering. Yeah, you never. Hope is usually, it's such a positive thing that we think of in Western culture, but when you really do look at it, it is fear. It makes 100%. It's 100% true. And it kind of like blows your mind, like, wow, I never even thought about that before. Yeah, JT, that is, I think it is partly a good practice, but on the other hand, I also think it's very conceptual too. Because, conceptual meaning that we use I mean, even in the suttas, the Buddha says Tathagata a lot, which means like the enlightened one. That's like you hear when somebody says the Tathagata, they're talking about the Buddha or enlightened ones. But even some places in the suttas, he says I. So that is really conventional more than anything else. You can say I, but know that there is no I. Or you can totally eradicate I, me from your vocabulary and still have no experiential knowledge or wisdom that there is no I. But I think it is a good practice anyway, at least up to a certain point, like in the very, very beginning. Because I do, in all honesty, I do say this body or this mind, and it's become fairly habitual. I mean, I would say 9 times out of 10, I will say this body or this mind. Sometimes I say my mind, but most of the time I say this. I think I missed a whole side conversation. I gotta check while I was speaking with JT here. Let's see. Oh, that's how we got into talking about pi. Marine, when I did my metta retreat, we started out with I, and we started out with all beings. May all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. But by the fourth day, all it was well, happy, and peaceful. Well, happy, and peaceful. No I and no them. Just well, happy, and peaceful. So I think that's a good part of the practice. You know, I came to find through the 7 days. Actually, I got a lot of negativity by the, and I was thinking to myself, man, I hope people don't have negativity about when I do the when I do the guided metta meditation, because I was having a lot of negativity about like Bhante Silananda doing the guided metta. I was like trying to do metta and follow along, and I was like, it's like, when is he gonna shut up? And I was like, whoa, that's not metta. That's not metta at all. That's agitation. That's dukkha. But what I found was that the words for me actually kind of get in the way, which is why when the new metta meditation that I put together for Thursdays, I say metta can be with words, visual, both, or neither. However, whatever works for you. And so I guess I've always been a very visual person. I learn visually. I'm the type of person, I never forget a face. I use to remember numbers, to remember things. I try to remember visual. I try to remember the visual of the number, not just trying to remember. I'm gonna remember 27. You know what I mean? So for me, metta with just the visuals is very, very powerful, and the words get in the way. But for others, the words are very helpful. And so a lot of times I will start out with the words just to start out and develop it in the very, very beginning to get into the mindset, and then after that it's all wordless. It's a good one for metta. Let me look. It's not heavy metal, is it? I think my computer is being slow. So do we have any other questions at this point? Aha! True enough. But you paid for it with your own money, right? The money that you earned, that's yours.
So just begin, just by relaxing.
Ah, yes, the Ajahn Brahm doing metta meditation. Yeah, I know that link. Ajahn Brahm, I would say, is the first monk that I really got attached to. And the reason I got attached to him was because he shows that you can, as a monk, you don't have to be this serious person. You can be humorous and kind and stuff like that. And I thought, and that like is how I like to be, like how I am. And I didn't necessarily, like, I had thought about being a monk before listening to Ajahn Brahm, but it was only like after like listening to Ajahn Brahm, like, I can be that way. I can be me if I become a monk like that. So you go to like Bhavana Society, that's all, everyone there is Sri Lankan monks. Well, 2 out of the 3, and I mean they have laughs and stuff like that, but they're mostly kind of very serious, unless there's a little laugh about Dhamma, you know. but but I feel like for Westerners, there's a different way of teaching Dhamma in a way, and the interesting thing about that is that I think Bhante Ji and Bhante Silananda understand that, because they like to have, that they do know that there is this kind of cultural and verbal divide between them as Sri Lankans and Westerners. So when I was talking to Bhante Silananda about me wanting to ordain, and one of the things I wanted to do was teach Dhamma to Westerners like myself, he's like, "Oh, that's very good." He's like, "We could use people like that." So I said, "I can't do it just yet, though. Sorry." But as Ajahn Brahm, there's really nothing that I've ever heard of Ajahn Brahm, or anything that he said that I can say, "Ooh, I don't know about that." There's plenty of other monks that I can say at least a couple things here and there. Ooh, I kind of question, but Ajahn Brahm, I don't know. Nothing has perked my radar of BS alert or whatever. But that's me. That's why the Dhamma is taught in many ways by many different people. Well, what's great? I think in all honesty, I mean, it's a lot of its personality, but I think he really learned that from Ajahn Chah too. Because if you've read any of his books, like the last a couple books ago during the the Dhamma readings that I do every Sunday, we read that book, Being Dharma, by Ajahn Chah, and he is a genius at being able to put Dhamma in ways that everybody can understand. Just like the Buddha, right? The Buddha didn't teach to rich literate people just only. I mean, he taught to the Brahmins, who were the highest caste. He taught to the totally illiterate people. He taught to everybody, and he had that skill to be able to transmit Dhamma to everybody, regardless of their education level, of their intellectual understanding. Well, and that's what the Buddha said Dhamma was, right? Dhamma is good, excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent at the end. So that makes perfect sense. Okay then. I suppose if oh, let's see. Is there a connection with Tao? Taoism is something that I really don't know that much about. I mean, I learned before becoming a Buddhist, I learned about a lot of different religions and philosophies. I tried Wicca. I practiced a lot of different things. I went to a lot of different culture, different religion temples and places. But I never really learned much about Taoism. So one of my friends actually gave me this book from some. Although it says I don't know if they don't call them enlightened ones in Taoism, but some kind of uh, wise advice from some Taoist master, blah blah blah. And as soon as I see that as like in the title of a book, I like, whoa, what's going on there? It's like the BS alert comes up, ding ding ding. Like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know what's going on. Well, you know what it is? It's the same thing with Buddhism. In Buddhist countries, there's people that say, I'm an arahant. Just 1995 plus shipping and handling, you can have my book to learn how to be an arahant too. And that's I thought that was BS. I really, nah, there's people who, nobody can really take those people seriously. But in Asia, that's 100% true. There are people that do that. So, the BS alert, yeah. That's called the skillful analysis. Yeah, there does seem to be some connections with Taoism and Buddhism, but also Jainism. Even though the Buddha didn't like Jainism at all. I mean, it's funny in the suttas. You don't normally think that Buddha is all kind of like, um, all things are fine, no issues, blah blah blah. But he really rips into the Jains, and it's kind of interesting. Like, whoa, what did the poor Jains ever do? I don't know. But and then there's parts in the suttas where like Ananda or Sariputta are debating with the Jains, which is interesting because there's a lot of connection between Jainism and Buddhism too. Because I don't know, I read a little bit like a blog or something about somebody discussing the two. And the person who like started Jainism is basically a contemporary of the Buddha. I mean, he's a little old. He was a little older than the Buddha. Had already started his his ministry before the Buddha started his. And so they lived at the same time. There's a lot of different connections, but they do divert, at some key points. So. I can't really think of any other philosophy or religion that really says there is no soul. It doesn't exist. Even like Taoism, I don't believe Taoism says there's no soul. At least not from what I've read. And Jainism. But, I'm speaking out of ignorance there. Intellectual ignorance. I really don't know too much about that. If anybody does, feel free to enlighten me. Well, there's that theory now, right? They even made a BBC special about it. Was Christ a Buddhist? I've said it in the beginning when I was a teenager and before I really became a Buddhist. I always thought of the Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, all of these like spiritual teachers, right? They kind of saw beyond normal. They saw a different way of living, and they wanted to teach that to everybody else. But then humans took it, and as time went by, they screwed it all up like humans do, right? That's our nature. and we add on to it, and we do all this stuff. Like if you learn about the early Christians, nothing like Catholicism or Christians today? Absolutely nothing. Women deacons and priests and all this kind of stuff that you like equate almost to like how Buddhism was with like the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis and all this stuff, but it all changed, right? So even Buddhism changed a lot, and there's there's some real animosity for a lot of people between Mahayana and Theravada, and I'll give you a good example. That book that I'm reading, Buddha Goes into a Bar. He's a Mahayana Lodro. He's a lay Buddhist teacher, I guess in a lot of ways like I am, and he's from the Tibetan tradition, and there's almost the whole book I've had no problems like mentally with. I was like, oh yeah, this is Dhamma, but then there's this one chapter about the Mahayana and how the Theravada is the Hinayana and it's the lower vehicle and that's for selfish people. And then my ego started to go, oh, like I was like wanted to throw the book, like what's going on? Like I don't even normally get angry, but I was like, what is so there is that view, right? That the Theravadins are selfish and that it's a lower teaching, but then there's also the Theravadan view that the Mahayanas, they added all that. I mean, that their suttas, the Lotus Sutra, and all that. That's all made up stuff. That's not what the Buddha said. So no matter what side of it you're on, that ego is part of it, right? The ego is in there, because when you say, I'm a Theravada, or you say I'm a Mahayana, it's the same thing with your teacher being enlightened, right? Your ego says, I wouldn't join a group that sucks, or that's not the best, so Mahayana is the best, or Theravada is the best. Let me check that book. What makes you not a Buddhist? I'll check that out. Well, I will say one thing. I don't like to use the word Buddhist. I've come to accept it simply because it's conventional. Like I personally like to use the word Dhammaist, because that's really what you are, right? You're following the Dhamma. Even the Buddha says, don't follow me. The Dhamma is your teacher. So you're technically a Dhammaist, but you say I'm a Dhammaist, people are like, what the hell is that? You say, oh, you're a Buddhist. Oh, okay, I understand. What the hell is a Dhammaist? So I asked Bhante Silananda when we were doing one of our walks at the Bhavana Society, and when we were talking and discussing Dhamma, and I asked him about that situation, and he says, like, we talked about Theravada, Mahayana, and he says, I don't belong to any of that. I don't belong to an ist. He says, I follow the teachings of the Buddha. That's it. And I said, you know what? That's a good way to put it too. The teachings of the Buddha. But I like Dhammaist. I think that makes the most sense because we're talking about Dhamma, right? Let's start a movement. I'm gonna go make a Facebook page right now. I'm a Dhammaist. Like 10 years later, it'll be just me and maybe one other person, right? Yep. Don't be an ist, right? Or an in. But it's all ego. Very true. But if you really think about it, when you are in that present moment, totally and completely, you're not anything. The ego is gone. You're just in that moment. Which is why the present moment is so cool. That's why the present moment can get addicting. And frustrating too, because when you can't get into the present moment, you start to really get frustrated about it, because you get the attachment to the present moment, right? Damn it, why can't I get in the present moment? That present moment is sucky. Or it's like it's some like you ever watch those like Animal Planet, like those hunting shows. The elusive precious moment stalks the bush. Very hard to find. That precious what you call? What was I saying? Oh yeah. Present moment. That's right. Oh, it's because the present moment is just another phenomena, right? Even they say, even the calm abiding, even this rapture of the first jhana, this feeling that you get, even that is just a phenomena that comes and goes. No matter how high you get in your meditation practice and advancement, they say, it don't matter. It's just another phenomena, and you just observe it. Because just like all things, it arises, it peaks, and then it goes away. And if you see things just as arising, peaking, and going away, then how can you think or have this concept of this permanent self? You can't. But we have to break through that veil of illusion. Destroy the delusion of things. It's the way it is. Only in so much as we want it to be truth. That's all. Okay, I guess we can end there, unless there's any final comments or questions. I think this will be the first time in a long time where we don't go over yapping on. But that's good, actually. I think next week I am going to do a talk on death. Actually, I did a Dhamma talk on death probably about almost a year ago now, and I put it on my YouTube channel. But I figure, you know what? A year goes by, it's probably good to talk about it again. Was anybody here on Sunday when we were reading the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, and Bhante Ji was talking about death? I came up with I started doing what Bhante Ji recommends is every night before you go to bed, he says, I may die tonight, and I'm okay with that, or I may die, I can die tonight. So I came up about a week ago. I came up with a motto, almost like a slogan that I put on a piece of paper to hang up in my room, and it's the final words of the Buddha, which are in the Pali, Appamadena Sampadeta, which means strive diligently. I think that puts it all together in such a compact, amazing two-word statement. Well, before that he said, all compound things are impermanent. Strive diligently for your own enlightenment, for your own liberation. Strive diligently. So that's now hanging up where I can see it. It's a reminder, right? And so what I added to that, and what I say now every night and every morning, is I can die today or tonight. I may die today or tonight. Strive diligently. So that's one of my new sayings, my new mottos that I try to do. This Buddha wants us to think about death at every breath, and we'll go over that next week. Death is something that I can actually yap on a couple hours about. But since it's a good topic, I also want everybody to talk about it with and to participate. You may be a corpse by tonight. Yeah, we all may be. Hell, we all might be a corpse in about 26 days. Because you know what's happening in 26 days, don't you? It's the end of the world as we know it. I feel fine.